So this is the mascot for the Rotterdam DrupalCon, which is going to be in September, right? Just for people who are actually wearing. So, hi everyone. I think we are ready to start. I'm Tassos Koutlas. I am Chief Technology Officer for Dropsolid AI, and I've been involved in Drupal for the better part of 20 years. Now my Drupal.org profile is saying 20 years. And I've been professionally involved in Drupal for 15 of those. So it's a great honor to welcome Professor Dimosthenis Anagnostopoulos, who is General Secretary of the Minister of Digital Governance, and Dries, founder of Drupal and of Acquia. All right? So thank you very much for being here. So, Professor Anagnostopoulos, since the US election, there's an ongoing debate in Europe on sovereignty, and for a large part, it's touching upon digital autonomy with respect to infrastructure services and applications. What is your take on that, and where is Greece positioned at the moment?
Okay, first of all, thank you for this invitation. It's kind of strange that I'm the only guy here that wears a tie, sitting next to Dries and a bunny, and talking about some stuff which is not very much, clarified so far. I mean, sovereignty is not only a buzzword, it's a quite important issue for us, not only Greece, not also at the European level, for every nation and every authority, I would say. Actually, what sovereignty means is that you are able of controlling and make decisions for your own systems, your own data, your infrastructure. And this, in a highly interconnected world, cannot be not only considered as easy to achieve, but also not even easy to clarify. Actually, sovereignty means that you can move from having strong barriers between systems in the connection, meaning that you have walls between systems, which is called air gaps. And on the other hand, having software mechanisms or even hardware mechanisms to achieve sovereignty. Let's not get very technical into this. The issue is that we want to be sovereign as Greece, and for this reason we have implemented, realized, adopted first a cloud-first strategy since 2020, but also, secondly, we have achieved a multi-cloud strategy. That is, we have on-prem infrastructure, we have used public cloud resources, and also we try to get the best of public cloud providers, because you know that each provider has certain features that you can benefit from. So we have done this very concisely from 2020. We rely much on our on-prem infrastructure. We have heavy loads and very processing-intensive loads that we now have that reside in our on-prem infrastructure, and we try to keep this air-gapped as possible. But this is not very easy to achieve. Also, when you take advantage of facilities and resources, such as AI resources, for example, when you try to implement, realize new systems, government systems, that use AI components or cloud-native components, then you have to be ad hoc connected to the one that provides these resources. So, for you to be able to maintain the provision of these services, it means that you can actually rely on resources that are not there, which have to come from a public cloud provider, an AI provider. And this is not very easy to do so. I imagine that you can all understand that when you need components that are located on public cloud infrastructure, then you are highly dependent on components that you cannot control yourself. So, to be fully sovereign, you need air gaps, you need systems that have all components installed in these premises. So you need AI components that are located on your on-prem systems. You need interconnections that do not need to be always available with outside systems. So you need everything to be installed in your on-prem world. This is not easy to achieve. This is extremely costly. And between this and the level that you totally rely on public cloud providers, it's a tremendous distance, I would say. To conclude, Greece, in both digital transformation, infrastructure, service provision, and also data, needs to be sovereign. We do have hybrid clouds for this adoption for this purpose. We try to get the best out of public cloud providers to achieve all features needed, especially for AI. This is not possible so far, but with the implementation of Pharos AI factory, that will be, will be possible in the forthcoming months. We hope to have a sovereign AI solution providing resources, providing services, both to SMEs, the public sector, universities, research centers, startups, for us to have such capabilities at a minimum cost, and also ensuring that this is a sovereign solution. This is what we have done so far. I believe that we're moving on the right track, and I believe that with the use of Pharos capabilities, this will become much more evident and much more solid in the forthcoming months.
Thank you very much. I have another question about Pharos later on, but on the same topic, Dries, you are a European, having a US-based company. How do you see the need of the EU independence debate, and what is your personal stance and position on that, on the autonomy and digital independence of Europe?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, hey everybody. I'm excited to be here. Also, thanks for being here. I'm very honored to be in this panel. So yeah, it's a little bit funny because, as you said, I'm a Belgian. I'm from Europe, but then I started my own company in the United States. So I'm kind of on both sides of this debate, I guess. But I would say that the reason I got really interested in open source more than 25 years ago is because I believed in the freedoms that open source gave me, the control that open source gave me. So I would say that digital sovereignty in Europe is really, really important. I'm a big advocate of it, first of all. And I think it's important not just for Europe, but for any country really in the world, to make sure that any critical services or important services that they're managed well. And for me, again, the reason I got into open source and why I made Drupal open source as well is because I always believe that proprietary software does not give you these freedoms. It does not give you the control. And so, and like, I'm not a policymaker, first of all. I'm a technologist, so I don't, I'm not an expert on policy making, but I do think we're at this very special moment now in history where Europe sort of has gotten a wake-up call, if you will, that it's really important to be digital, to be sovereign. And so I think it's very exciting, and I think it's important that we help, as technologists, that we help policymakers understand the value that open source can add in this debate. And one of the things that I'm seeing, for example, right now, a lot of people are saying, buy European software as the answer to be, sovereign. And I think it's wrong, personally. I think it's nice to buy European software because it helps provide jobs in Europe, but proprietary software is not a solution to get digital sovereignty. And I'll give you an example. Like Skype would be a great example. It was a European company, and in one board meeting, it was decided that eBay was going to buy Skype. And so overnight, proprietary European software became non-digitally sovereign. And so I truly believe that the solution is open source. And that's why I've been writing these blog posts about it. That's why I've been kind of speaking up a little bit. And so really it comes down to, digital sovereignty comes not down to where the headquarters are of a company. It comes down to, do you have the control over the software so that when something changes, you don't lose control. And I think open source is the answer, especially for the most mission critical systems.
All right.
And the fact that I have a US-based company really doesn't change my opinion on that, to be quite honest. It's deep in my DNA.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think also Europe has waken up and at least is debating on those issues, which I think is very important. But also Greece is defining its digital strategy. Recently there was an update, draft update on the digital strategy document with an horizon to 2030. It calls to transform Greece into an innovation nation, to create a resilient economy, a competitive economy, and a state that reduces inequalities and enhances transparency. There are plenty of mentions of open source in that strategic document. Just to pull out a few: open by default policy mandate for digital services, open technology labs, a national open science strategy. So could you please outline what's the strategic axis and the national targets, and what role would open source play on that?
Thank you for this. I would just like first to comment on the sovereignty definition and means to reach sovereignness. Sorry, because for you it's open source. For others, it's data centers. For others, it's companies that, where the company resides. And also, for others, it's the people, nationality. So, yes, sovereignty is something which is so far kind of vague how to achieve. And it's very nice to dig into this in the forthcoming months, and also for Europe to try to find mechanisms to be sovereign as much as possible. Now, concerning the openness, I would say that openness, not only open source, but openness is a key issue in our digital strategy in the forthcoming years. Openness in terms of open government, because we build a new version of OpenGov. OpenGov, is a platform where all or actions of the government are published, or legislative actions are published before legislated, all or laws. So we build a new version of OpenGov to provide enhanced capabilities for commenting and, of course, further contribution of everybody in this legislative process. Second, we do have open data, because, to be frank, Greece has not been very successful so far in the use of open data. We plan to have much more data sets available, not only for openness, but also to enhance innovation and provide the means for startups and research also to get benefit of open data as we need to do so. And in the way that both really open data, but also government data, anonymized data, are used for this purpose. And I quote again that we have not been very successful in the past in this respect, but we plan to do so in the best possible way. Data governance is of much importance in this respect, and that's why we have new policies concerning data governance. So, now the third action, of course, the third action is the one relating to open source. It's true that when you rely on public cloud providers, and when you rely on cloud-native services to build new systems, you cannot be very much open in terms of open source. On the other hand, the mechanism, and I very much appreciate and agree on what you said on open source, is the one that enables I would say a wide adoption and a wide commenting and at the worldwide level contribution of building mechanisms that really you can trust and really are sovereign. And for this purpose, we have quoted openness in terms of open systems as a key strategic aspect of our new strategy, of our new digital transformation strategy. And I believe that not only we can mention it, but in this respect, we can enforce it in the forthcoming years, something that we have not done so I would say, that much in the past years. So I hope to be here with you in the forthcoming years and being able to comment on what we have achieved in this respect and say that we've moved from this point to the next level in terms of open software and what we have really benefited from this strategy. And also, I have to say that this is something that doesn't have to do only with Greece, but also Europe. There are kind of strategies and different actions at different levels and different countries, but Europe could potentially come up with a policy in this respect. And I would also say that achievements such as the one of Dries and Drupal are key in this respect, because when you have open source software which can be really supported and you can really rely upon, this is the best answer to questions that have arisen in the past, as you all are aware of. So congrats on what you have achieved, and also congrats on the on the further evolution of Drupal as an AI orchestrator, as was announced in 2026, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
And taking the cue from that, Drupal itself is a system that is used at the European Union level, at the Commission, a lot of the EU agencies, and other governments around the world. So I'm interested to hear in more detail about your view on how open source in general can help motivate that digital autonomy within nations and companies.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge that digital sovereignty is kind of a complicated topic in a way, and there's many layers to it, like the software, the data. I mean, all the elements are important to get right, I think. And I'm mostly a software person, so I kind of look at it through that lens primarily. But yeah, you know, open source and Drupal is very widely used across governments today. The website of Europe runs on Drupal, as an example. And then within the European Commission, there's hundreds of Drupal websites, and I'm sure we have some people from the Commission in the audience. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we have. Yeah. Monica's here.
We do, yeah. And then, like somebody in the community actually did some analysis. I think it was about a year ago, and they found over 1,000 Drupal websites in the French federal government, just in France alone. Or I think many of you might know that in the Australian government, I know it's not Europe, but the Australian government has basically decided, like over 10 years ago now, to standardize on Drupal across all of the government agencies. And so they have hundreds of Drupal sites as well. So I think Drupal is already well established in these governments. And the reason why so many governments use Drupal is for, you know, because they like what Drupal does. It gives them the features that they need, but also it puts them in control, as we kind of talked about. You know, which is quite nice. I would also like to maybe mention that there are a lot of initiatives right now taken by the European Commission around digital sovereignty. And one of the frameworks that is already published is the Cloud Sovereignty Framework, as an example. And it actually looks at multiple dimensions of digital sovereignty. It looks at the software, it looks at the data, it looks at other elements. And I actually read it, and I provided feedback to it, because one of the things that I thought could be better is that right now, so the way this framework works is like there's like I think it's 7 or 8 different components to digital sovereignty, and then you can basically, and for each component there's subcategories, if you can think about it that way, and then you can grade yourself and at the end you get sort of a composite score, like all these elements combined give you a score that says how digital sovereign something is. And this framework is then to be used by procurement people within European Commission and for software that they procure for their institutions. But if you look at the framework and how the formula, which is also public, everybody can go look at it, it only puts a 4% weight on open source, which I think is like a rounding error. And I think there's actually some challenges in this framework, and I wrote up my thoughts and I submitted them actually to the European Commission as feedback. I have not heard back. I mean, hundreds of people have provided feedback, so I'm not surprised, but I hope that they will look at all of this feedback, because I think, and I think this is where us technologists can help the policymakers, to give them the information they need to hopefully evolve the framework. And I think it's actually quite important because they're also working on the Cloud and AI Development Act, which is actually a much bigger deal than the Cloud Sovereignty Framework, because the Cloud Sovereignty Framework is only used by the European Commission when they procure software for themselves. But this next thing, the Cloud and AI Development Act, will be used by countries all over Europe. So the impact and the scale of this new framework is like, I don't know, 10 times, 100 times bigger or something. And so we have to help educate, I think, the policymakers so that they can hopefully not just take what they did for the first framework and just blindly copy it, and hopefully there's an opportunity to evolve it a little bit. But yeah, and so that's what I've tried to do with one of my blog posts, which was the software sovereignty scale that I proposed to help people kind of understand the differences between different types of software and how they can each contribute to digital sovereignty. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a very complex situation because, like, I'll throw out a maybe controversial question, just to maybe get you thinking, but like, I would argue that Drupal running on top of AWS, which is, AWS is not sovereign. Even if you run it on servers in Europe, it has an issue because of the US Cloud Act, actually, which requires, even if, Amazon being a US company, them having servers in Europe, the US still has access to this data, by the way, and that's because of US law. So that's a challenge, right? And this is true not just for Amazon, but for Microsoft, it's true for Google, all the data centers across Europe. But anyway, I would argue that Drupal running on AWS servers in Europe is actually more sovereign than European proprietary software running on European cloud. Because, and this is maybe a little bit controversial, and I think the reason it's more sovereign is because the switching costs. Like if you're running a complex proprietary application on a European cloud and that company gets acquired overnight and becomes a US company or a Chinese company, doesn't matter, your switching costs can be incredibly high versus a Drupal website running on Google Cloud or AWS. The switching costs can be very, very low, actually. You can probably move that Drupal site in a day to a European cloud. And so I think it's something to think about, and I think it's also why this can be kind of a complex situation, So, and you don't have to agree with that statement, by the way, but yeah, it's complex.
It is a complex issue because we have been moving to a world that is more connected, and now it feels like we're going the opposite direction. I'll continue with a controversial question.
Policies and regulations may also be applicable.
Yes.
Respect. Yeah.
So one other controversial question is the funding of open source. I know you've been writing and thinking for a while now how open source projects like Drupal can attract contributions, they can create economies of scale. Mm-hmm. There's also an ongoing debate at the European level whether there is a separate fund which could potentially fund open source projects that are crucial for running software supply chains, and also the European autonomy. So I was just wondering, what's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, let me try and kind of break down my thoughts, because first of all, and I think everybody in the room knows this, but open source has created a massive amount of value. There was like a Harvard study, I think, a couple of years ago, and they said that the value created by open source was $8.8 trillion. I mean, like a crazy amount. And the same study also said that the maintenance of that, all that open source software that is worth 8.8 trillion is actually pretty fragile. You know, the maintenance of open source depends on relatively few people, so that's a bit of a challenge. Like, yeah, many of you. And so that's one thing. A second thing I would say is, and, you know, like maybe 10, 15 years ago, I wrote another blog post, sorry. I know I say that sentence quite a bit, but I made the case that I think open source will eventually have to be funded, not fully funded by governments, but partially funded by governments. And the reason I said that is because I looked at other things in the world and how they have evolved over decades of time. And so a lot of things actually start out as volunteer-driven, then evolve to be commercially funded by private companies, and eventually the government has to step in and help fund it as well. And so like examples would be the school system. Like, you know, way back when people were just teaching kids, and then there was commercial schools, and now the government helps run schools. The road system, the same thing. You know, roads were created by people moving between homes or locations. At some point, companies had an interest in making faster roads, and so they helped fund roads. And now in most countries, the roads are funded by the government. Military, same thing. So a lot of things have moved from volunteer to commercially kind of owned, I guess, or to government run. And it's never like 100% clean, you know? And I've always felt like open source would follow the same trajectory, and I think that's slowly playing out because so many critical services, citizen services, all these things depend on open source right now, you know? Like, if open source were to go away, would be a lot of pain for a lot of governments. So anyway, and so as we talked about, a lot of governments are using Drupal or are using open source, but very few governments are actually contributing back to open source. They're users, they're not contributors primarily. And I think eventually that will have to change because, yeah, it becomes so critical for governments that open source continues to work reliably. Like, it's funny because, like, you know, when I'm in Belgium, I bike sometimes, or I drive the car, and I often drive on this road, and there's this sign, and it says there, the Belgian government, or the Flemish government, is investing 7 million euros in building a bridge for bikers, which is great, you know, like, I love that. But then I sit there and I think, wow, if only we could spend, you know, a couple million on open source as well, you know, like, and I would argue that more people would benefit from that than, you know, the people would cross this bridge.
The bikers in Ghent.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I'm not against this bridge by any means. I would just love to see governments also like invest in open source because it benefits millions of Belgian citizens. And hopefully that will happen. And I'll wrap up my answer, sorry, but like, you know, two things. One, I think there's been a lot of conversations about evolving the procurement system as well, because right now in the government, you know, they tend to favor organizations that offer the lowest price. And that's actually a disadvantage for makers of open source, you know, many of you, like, because you have people on your payroll, on your staff that are also contributing to the development of, say, Drupal, it can be hard to compete purely on price. So one of my proposals was make open source contribution an extra criteria, not the only criteria, price matters, but also look at open source contribution when you're evaluating, you know, which company to use to implement open source. And I think that could be a massive boost for open source. And then yes, my second proposal would be some direct funding for open source as well. And you know, governments spend a lot of money. I think in Belgium alone, they spend 2 billion a year just on the roads. And if only, like, you know, a project like Drupal could get $300,000 a year from the government, I think that would already be a massive, massive help for us. So long answer, sorry, but like, yeah, that's
It's an interesting debate. I would like to change gears for a second here and come back to you, Professor Anagnostopoulos. In Greece's digital strategy, artificial intelligence is mentioned a few times, especially as a primary catalyst, and there are flagship projects like the supercomputer Daedalus and the AI factory, Pharos. There's also mention about Greek data spaces around language and culture and health. So could you please elaborate a little bit more on that? And then I have a follow-up question just on Pharos AI in more particular.
First, to continue what Dries has said, at the European level, there are concrete projects, and I believe that will be a success in the forthcoming months. Two key projects are the European wallet, the EUDI wallet, and also the age verification mechanism application, which has been presented not at the final stage from EU. These projects, both projects, one of the European wallet and age verification application, will be used at the European level to provide, the first one, mobility across Europe, and also access to both private sector and public sector services for all citizens that will have such a wallet installed in their smartphone. So, and also payment, digital payment mechanism. So I believe that open source and projects that can be widely implemented at the European level need to be based on open source. This is what the EU does. So that's why the reference model, the initial model which has been presented is, of course, open source. The same happens for age verification. And, you know, and of course, you are all aware of the importance of age verification mechanism for the prevention of a bunch of issues concerning minors, from alcohol to access to social media and platforms and tobacco products, etc. So what we may come up with is that EU, when implements something at the European level, does it based on open software. And I think this is a very nice conclusion that we can come up with. Now, concerning AI, yes, AI strategy is of much importance in our digital strategy, whole digital transformation strategy. It has to do both with digital transformation, also innovation. So it has to do with the public sector and the private sector as well, and also the economy of Greece, and provide sustainability and growth. And we also think that has also to do with geopolitical location of this country, because investments that have been so far attracted in Greece from hyperscalers and different investors, various investors, for building data centers also has to do with the potential of building AI data centers that provide services not only to the Greek companies and public sector, but also to parties outside Greece. So perhaps in cooperation with countries such as Middle East countries or other countries in the region, because we're at a very important region in southeastern Mediterranean. We believe that we can be a hub, data center hub, an AI hub, which has an increased importance and increased, I would say, value concerning sovereignty and also being able to provide services, consistent services at all times. So, what Pharos, on the other hand, provides? Pharos is a project building an ecosystem around AI. It's based on a supercomputer called Daedalus. This is the infrastructure. Pharos is the ecosystem. Pharos will benefit from the processing power and features of Daedalus to provide services. and building this ecosystem. And building these capabilities means that SMEs, startups, research centers, universities will benefit from this and have minimum cost or no cost for at least the next two forthcoming years, for us to develop this ecosystem and also give resources and capabilities to these companies and entities around Greece. It's one of the 7 AI factories, a contract that has been awarded to Greece. 7 AI factories are now being built across Europe. And there's a new call at the time, which is open, concerning the gigafactories, but this is something that we will have to discuss at some later point. Now, we build Pharos. It will be live within 2026. And we believe that this ecosystem that will focus on health, sustainability, civilization, and of course, the Greek language models will be of much importance for our country. Needless to say how important it is to have an LLM for the Greek language. This is of key importance. And we also believe that building such an ecosystem will be of much, I would say, will give a push to this, to our country's economy, not for this year, but the forthcoming years, and also realize our digital transformation and its involvement into the next era, the era of AI. We envision that in the next years, not only in the public sector where GovGR has emerged and now has more than 2.2 thousand services provided to citizens, but also an AI, GovAI, which is an environment that provides digital services through the use of AI, through the support of AI to all Greek citizens. I would believe that not only this will be possible in the forthcoming years, but much more features, and also digital services where each digital service may be somehow supported or enabled by AI. And this is our vision for GovGR at the moment, having AI enabling environment for all major digital services provided by our country in the forthcoming years.
Follow-up question on Pharos. You said 2026. Can you share some light how a business could participate in that ecosystem, like if there's a governance layer around it and what the operating model would be?
Mm-hmm. Pharos is a company that has recently been, become fully operational, and I'm also a member of the directors of Pharos. So there are decisions to be taken and announcements to be made. But what is important is that free resources, AI resources, will be provided to SMEs, researchers, universities, and startups around Greece for the forthcoming 2 years. Just be patient, if possible, for just a little while, for us to make these announcements, and being able to provide what not only you, but many firms and also researchers around Greece require at the moment, very, very constantly, and they are very eager to get use of these resources.
Excellent, thanks. We are both on AI-enabled companies, so we are waiting eagerly. There's the 5-minute mark, so I have like a final question to both of you. Basically, it's the same question. AI and technology is evolving the field, disrupting the field, whatever word you want to use. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts around that, whether there are specific policies that would be coming out or within the EU Act, or, there's a debate in our also community as well with AI contributions. So, Professor Anagnostopoulos, would you like to start? Just your closing?
Concerning policies and measures, I would say that, first I would like to say that it's the degree of determination, to my understanding, that is important for processes that may be automated or being AI-enabled. So when this is quite determined, and not stochastic, this has a greater degree of automation and being AI-enabled at the moment. And yes, I consider that many aspects of our everyday life will be somehow enabled by AI, and potentially everybody, not only people that kind of disabled or of greater need of AI, but everybody will have a personal assistant in the forthcoming years, somehow to be used as potentially, getting a suggestion from this personal assistant at everyday, at aspects of everyday life. And this is not very bad. This is a very, very nice feature that we can benefit from. On the other hand, in terms of professionals, for example, developers and people of technology, I would say that yes, in terms of programming skills and programming capabilities, AI really has to do something with it, and changes may appear. But on the other hand, I think that both expertise in specific domain and being able to somehow deal with complex problems at the design level and in the level where the application domain is needed, it's something that won't be easily approached by AI. So I'm very enthusiastic on the use of AI, and also very optimistic in terms of jobs that will not disappear. On the other hand, jobs may have to migrate to other domains. In the past, all studies have shown that revolutions have just migrated jobs from one domain to another, and people that are smart and are capable of providing something which is essential will find something else to provide which is more essential and more of additional level of capability. So I'm very optimistic about this, not the other way. But on the other hand, concerning citizens, I really believe that support that may get from AI will be of crucial importance, and this is something that we have, that everybody of us has to anticipate, both at the practical level and also at the level of interactions with the government, also with the private sector.
Thank you very much. Dries?
Yeah, I mean, I just, at DrupalCon Chicago, just a month ago, I talked a lot about AI. And so, I mean, in short, in my mind, AI is disrupting everything in our world. And the way I talked about it at DrupalCon is, like, in my mind, we've had this stable triangle in Drupal, where you have the software, you have the ecosystem of the agencies and the hosting companies, and then the third part of the triangle is actually the open source community producing software, creating Drupal. And the question that I tried to answer in my keynote is, what happens when AI disrupts all three legs of the triangle at the same time? Like, because I think, one, on the product side, AI is changing the expectation that people have from software. Two, the digital agency business model is also under a lot of pressure, and that's evolving. And three, is, like, people in our community are starting to use AI to contribute to Drupal. And maybe to pick on that, because you alluded to it in your question, there's a lot of debate about that, so maybe I'll say something brief about that. So there's been proposals, I guess, about banning the use of LLMs, specifically for contributing to Drupal. And I personally think it's not a good idea. I'm also, like a professor, I'm, optimistic about AI. Of course, that doesn't mean that this change is hard and that there's impact of AI and LLM. So it's not an easy transition. But like, look, the train has left the station. Like, we're not going to undo these LLMs. And people are using LLMs when they do development. I use LLMs when I do Drupal development. And so the solution isn't to ban the tools. The solution is to keep humans accountable for the results of these tools. All right, so like I propose something like you only submit a patch that you wrote with an LLM if you actually understand what the patch does. And so that means you have to put in the time and effort to understand the generated output, and you have to stand behind it. And honestly, that's a known pattern. Like, let's say pilots, when they fly a plane from A to B, they pretty much put it on autopilot, like it's not like they're sitting there, fiddling with the wheel or whatever it's called in a plane. No, they use autopilot, but at the same time, they're still responsible for their passengers. Like if something goes wrong, they need to be able to fly the plane. And actually in our lives, we use things like Waze, like to navigate. But if Waze tells you to turn left and there's a sign you're not allowed to turn left, it's still on us to say, actually, I have to turn right? So we see automation in a lot of aspects of our lives, and we see that humans are ultimately responsible for the outcomes of that. And the same is true with LLMs. So my advice is, yeah, sure, use LLMs if you'd like. You don't have to. But if you do use an LLM to contribute to Drupal, actually stand behind the code that you submitted. And actually, in a previous session, Christian, I don't know if he's here, but like, he said something that's, there he is. It's hard to see, but like, I'm gonna try and paraphrase, but he says, you shouldn't use a tool like LLMs unless you know to do the job without the tool. And I thought it was a great statement. But the same thing applies, like, if you know what you're doing, if you're an expert, yeah, go use these tools, because I do think they can actually amplify what you do. So that's my take on our debate.
That's a very good take to finish this off. Dimosthenis, Dries, thank you so much for this fruitful discussion. Thanks everybody for watching.